The island of Oahu, bathed in golden light on the morning of December 7, 1941, seemed like paradise itself. The city of Honolulu stretched quietly along the Pacific coastline, where palm trees swayed gently in the warm breeze and the air carried the scent of salt and hibiscus. Beyond the beaches, the lush green hills of the Ko'olau Range glowed under the rising sun. The calm waters of Pearl Harbor reflected a flawless sky, a picture of peace that concealed the storm about to descend. It was 7 a.m., and across the harbor, life followed its familiar Sunday rhythm. Sailors aboard the great battleships, the USS Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and California, were just waking up. Some stood on deck, sipping coffee and joking about weekend plans. Others prepared for church service, unaware that their final morning had begun. The city itself was still half asleep. Families prepared breakfast, children played near the docks, and fishermen cast their nets into the tranquil bay. Miles away, high above the endless ocean, the hum of Japanese aircraft engines broke the stillness of dawn. A formation of 353 planes, launched from 6 aircraft carriers hidden in the northern Pacific, cut through the clouds in perfect silence. The pilots, their faces calm but hearts racing, followed the rising sun, the emblem on their wings a symbol of Japan's imperial might. Beneath them lay the unsuspecting heart of America's Pacific defense. Pearl Harbor, home to the United States Navy's most powerful battleships. The strategic stakes were enormous. Japan's empire had been expanding through East Asia, hungry for resources, oil, rubber, and steel, all essential for its war machine. But American embargoes and diplomatic pressure had strangled Japan's ambitions. Tokyo's leaders, seeing no path forward through negotiation, made a fateful choice: to strike the U.S. fleet before it could strike them. Their objective was clear: cripple the Pacific Fleet, destroy America's resolve, and buy time for Japan to dominate the Pacific. Back in Hawaii, the serenity was deceiving. A few radar operators at Opana Point, scanning the skies, noticed an unusually large formation approaching from the north. Believing it to be a group of American B-17 bombers expected from the mainland, they dismissed the warning. Down below, soldiers at the airfields were polishing aircraft and performing morning drills, while others lounged lazily in the soft tropical sun. No one imagined that, within minutes, the skies would erupt in fire. At 7:48 a.m., the first wave of Japanese aircraft broke through the clouds over Oahu. Civilians on their porches looked up in confusion as dark shapes appeared against the light, hundreds of them. Then came the thunder. The whine of engines turned into a scream as bombs began to fall, tearing through the calm morning air. The explosions rolled across the harbor like waves of thunder, shattering the peace and marking the moment when history turned. Smoke began to rise from Battleship Row, curling into the blue sky. Sirens blared across Honolulu, and the island that had awoken in peace now trembled in terror. Soldiers scrambled to man anti-aircraft guns, often firing in disbelief at the red suns painted on the wings of their attackers. Civilians ran for cover, shielding their children as shockwaves rippled through homes and streets. The paradise of Hawaii had transformed into a battlefield. For those on the ground, the experience was chaos, a nightmare of noise, fire, and confusion. Some thought it was a training exercise. Others prayed. Radios crackled to life with frantic messages: "This is not a drill." Repeat: "This is not a drill." The United States, still reeling from the Great Depression and far from the battlefields of Europe, had been suddenly, violently pulled into global war. By the time the first wave had finished its deadly run, the air over Pearl Harbor was thick with smoke and the smell of burning oil. The attack was not just a strike on a fleet, it was a strike at the heart of a nation's sense of safety. What had begun as another peaceful Sunday had become a turning point in world history. The morning America was awakened by fire. The seeds of the Pearl Harbor attack were sown months, even years, before December 7, 1941. Japan, seeking to dominate the Pacific, faced a major obstacle: the United States Pacific Fleet. The U.S., wary of Japan's expansion into China and Southeast Asia, had imposed economic sanctions and embargoes, cutting off critical supplies like oil and steel. For Japanese leaders, diplomacy had failed, and war seemed inevitable. Their solution: a bold, decisive strike that could cripple the American naval power before it could respond. High above the northern Pacific, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers slipped silently across thousands of miles of ocean. The fleet, a meticulously choreographed armada, included Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, each bristling with aircraft prepared for the mission. The crews had trained for months, practicing takeoffs, landings, and precise bombing runs in near-perfect secrecy. Every pilot knew the stakes. The success of the mission could shape the destiny of an empire. At dawn on December 7th, the Japanese carriers launched 353 aircraft, divided into strike formations designed for maximum destruction. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters streaked toward Oahu, cutting through the ocean mist with deadly purpose. Navigating over 3,000 miles of open water without detection required careful planning and nerves of steel. Their pilots, young and determined, carried more than bombs. They carried the ambitions of a nation. Meanwhile, the U.S. Pacific Fleet remained largely unprepared. Battleships rested in Battleship Row, anchored in neat lines, with crews unaware that war had arrived. Airfields like Ford Island and Kaneohe Bay held dozens of aircraft, many fueled and ready, but poorly positioned to counter a surprise aerial attack. Soldiers conducted routine maintenance, and sailors joked over breakfast, oblivious to the shadows approaching from the horizon. As the first Japanese planes approached, early radar warnings were received at Opana Radar Station. Operators detected the large formation of inbound aircraft and immediately reported it to Fort Shafter's command. The reply was fatal in its complacency. The approaching planes were dismissed as a group of friendly B-17 bombers from the mainland. Within minutes, this misjudgment would prove catastrophic. At 7:48 a.m., the air over Pearl Harbor erupted in chaos. The first wave of Japanese dive bombers descended from the clouds, releasing torpedoes and bombs aimed at the heart of the U.S. fleet. Explosions ripped through decks and gun emplacements. Fire spread across battleships and hangars alike, sending plumes of smoke high into the sky. Sailors scrambled to man anti-aircraft guns, while others raced to save wounded comrades. Civilians, caught in the surreal sight of aircraft circling overhead, ran for cover along streets and beaches, many screaming in disbelief. Strategically, the attack was a calculated masterpiece. Torpedo bombers targeted battleships to prevent them from leaving the harbor, while dive bombers struck airfields, fuel depots, and repair facilities. Fighters provided cover, engaging any U.S. aircraft that tried to intercept. Each movement, each drop of ordnance, was choreographed to maximize destruction and minimize Japanese losses. The calm Sunday morning had been replaced with a well-planned orchestration of death and chaos. By the time the first wave completed its assault, it had destroyed or severely damaged 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, and 4 destroyers. Nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed, and over 1,500 Americans had been killed in the opening salvo. Yet the Japanese pilots pressed onward, heading back to their carriers to prepare for the second wave, confident that they had struck a decisive blow to American naval power. The stage was set for history. Pearl Harbor, once a symbol of American might and Pacific security, had been transformed into a smoldering battlefield. The first moments of the attack not only tested the courage and resilience of U.S. forces but also signaled the beginning of a new, devastating chapter in World War II, one where the United States would be forced from isolation into total war. By 7:55 a.m., the first wave of Japanese planes had fully engaged the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Battleship Row, once a symbol of American naval power, became a scene of devastation. Torpedoes streaked across the water, striking hulls with thunderous impact. Bombs tore through decks, igniting massive fires that sent black smoke spiraling toward the sky. The USS Arizona, hit directly in her forward ammunition magazine, erupted in a colossal explosion, obliterating the ship's superstructure and killing over 1,100 men instantly. The force of the blast shook the harbor, and burning fragments rained onto nearby ships and piers. Nearby, the USS Oklahoma capsized after multiple torpedo hits, trapping hundreds of sailors in the dark, flooded compartments below deck. Despite the overwhelming destruction, crews fought desperately to save both their ships and their fellow men. Sailors dove into burning oil-slicked waters to rescue the wounded, while others manned anti-aircraft guns, their eyes fixed on the red circles of the attacking planes. Each moment was a struggle between life and death, courage and chaos. Airfields across Oahu, including Ford Island and Kaneohe Bay, became secondary battlegrounds. Japanese dive bombers targeted grounded aircraft, hangars, and fuel depots. Explosions sent flames shooting into the sky, turning grassy airfields into infernos. The roar of fighter planes filled the air as American pilots attempted to scramble, many taking off under heavy fire, some crashing into the harbor or into burning hangars. The anti-aircraft batteries, though valiant, were often overwhelmed by the precision and coordination of the attackers. Amid the carnage, acts of extraordinary heroism emerged. Doris "Dory" Miller, a Navy cook aboard the USS West Virginia, seized an unattended anti-aircraft gun, returning fire against the Japanese planes despite having no formal training. His bravery saved lives and inspired those around him. Across the harbor, medics and sailors worked tirelessly to pull men from the wreckage, extinguish fires, and prevent the total destruction of the fleet. Every moment of resistance, no matter how small, was a testament to courage under fire. The first wave, lasting nearly 90 minutes, inflicted catastrophic damage, but it was only the beginning. The second wave, launched shortly after 8:40 a.m., intensified the assault. This group focused on battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and critical infrastructure, aiming to finish what the first wave had begun. Bombs struck fuel depots, sending firestorms across dockyards. Anti-aircraft crews, though exhausted, continued to fire, claiming some enemy planes while others pressed on undeterred. Smoke, flames, and the acrid smell of burning fuel created a surreal, apocalyptic atmosphere over Pearl Harbor. By around 9:45 a.m., the second wave began its retreat. The skies over Oahu cleared slightly, leaving behind a harbor transformed. 8 battleships had been damaged or sunk, including the total loss of the USS Arizona and the capsizing of the USS Oklahoma. 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and nearly 200 aircraft had been destroyed. Over 2,400 Americans were dead, and more than 1,000 were wounded. For the Japanese attackers, the operation had achieved its tactical objectives. The Pacific Fleet was temporarily crippled, and American morale had suffered a staggering blow. Yet, strategically, the attack was incomplete. The U.S. aircraft carriers, the real backbone of naval power in the Pacific, were absent that day. These carriers would soon become instrumental in the counteroffensive that would eventually turn the tide of the war. The main battle at Pearl Harbor, though devastating, was only the opening salvo in a global conflict that would engulf the world. The main battle of Pearl Harbor remains one of history's most iconic moments of warfare, a sudden, perfectly timed strike that showcased the devastating potential of modern aerial attacks while highlighting the heroism and resilience of those who stood against overwhelming odds. As the smoke cleared over Pearl Harbor in the late morning of December 7, 1941, a grim reality emerged. The harbor, once a symbol of American naval strength, was now a landscape of destruction. Battleships lay overturned or in flames, their blackened hulls reflecting the rising sun. The water was slick with oil, debris, and the remnants of the men who had valiantly fought to defend their fleet. Over 2,400 Americans had lost their lives, and nearly 1,200 were wounded, many with injuries so severe that recovery would take months, if not years. Yet amid the tragedy, there were glimmers of resilience. Sailors and civilians worked tirelessly to rescue survivors from the burning ships. Firefighting crews battled raging infernos, while medical teams improvised triage stations, treating the wounded under harrowing conditions. The courage displayed in those first chaotic hours would become a lasting symbol of American determination. Strategically, the attack achieved many of Japan's immediate objectives. 8 battleships were damaged or sunk, nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed, and the U.S. Pacific Fleet was temporarily crippled. The element of surprise had given Japan a fleeting advantage, leaving American commanders stunned and scrambling to assess the extent of the devastation. However, the attack had not destroyed the U.S. aircraft carriers, which were away at sea. This oversight would prove critical in the months to come, as carriers became the cornerstone of American naval power in the Pacific. The political and cultural impact of Pearl Harbor was profound. On December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed a joint session of Congress, declaring December 7 a date which will live in infamy. His speech galvanized a nation still reeling from the Great Depression, uniting Americans in outrage, grief, and resolve. Within hours, Congress declared war on Japan, officially propelling the United States into World War II. The sleepy nation had been awakened, no longer able to remain on the sidelines of a global conflict. In the weeks following the attack, the American military began a rapid mobilization. Recruitment surged, shipyards worked around the clock, and industrial production accelerated to support the war effort. Pearl Harbor had revealed vulnerabilities, but it also sparked a transformation. The birth of a wartime economy, the rise of technological innovation, and a renewed sense of purpose that would carry the United States through the coming years of global conflict. On a personal level, families mourned the lost and injured, yet communities banded together in support. Monuments and memorials were soon erected, most notably the USS Arizona Memorial, ensuring that the sacrifices made that day would never be forgotten. Pearl Harbor became both a warning and a rallying cry, symbolizing the costs of unpreparedness and the resilience of a nation forged in adversity. The outcome of Pearl Harbor was thus dual: tactically, a devastating blow to the Pacific Fleet; strategically and culturally, the catalyst that brought America fully into World War II. In the ashes of that dark Sunday morning, a sleeping giant had been awakened, and the stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the world. Amid the chaos and destruction of Pearl Harbor, countless acts of courage and selflessness unfolded. Moments that transformed tragedy into heroism and revealed the resilience of the human spirit. One of the most celebrated stories is that of Doris "Dory" Miller, a Navy cook aboard the USS West Virginia. With bombs exploding around him and flames consuming the decks, Miller seized an unattended anti-aircraft gun and fired at incoming Japanese planes. Despite having no formal training, he shot down enemy aircraft and helped rescue wounded sailors, earning the Navy Cross for his bravery, a historic first for an African-American sailor in World War II. On the deck of the USS Arizona, men fought for survival even as the ship was engulfed in flames and ultimately destroyed. Some leaped into the burning harbor, risking their lives to save comrades trapped in the oil-slicked waters. Stories of sailors tying themselves together to prevent drifting apart, and of others refusing to leave their posts despite certain death, exemplified extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Nurses and medics at nearby facilities faced an unimaginable task. Makeshift triage centers overflowed with the wounded. Medical personnel worked tirelessly, often with limited supplies, tending to burns, broken bones, and shrapnel injuries while bombs still fell in the distance. Civilians, too, joined the efforts, carrying the injured from the streets, ferrying water to douse fires, and offering shelter to families caught in the destruction. One sailor remembered the moment the USS Oklahoma capsized, trapping hundreds inside. "We thought we were going to die. I could hear my shipmates calling for help in the darkness. Every second felt like an eternity, but we held on, praying someone would pull us out." Miraculously, many trapped sailors were rescued in the following hours, though hundreds still perished beneath the overturned hull. Even children and ordinary citizens were affected. Families watched in horror from the shores of Honolulu as smoke and flames consumed the harbor. Some fled their homes, while others helped neighbors in need, demonstrating an unexpected resilience and solidarity that would become emblematic of the American spirit during wartime. These personal stories provide a stark contrast to the strategic and military aspects of the attack. While battleships and aircraft dominate historical accounts, it is the courage, sacrifice, and humanity of individuals that leave the most lasting impression. Pearl Harbor was not only a military event, it was a profoundly human experience, marked by fear, loss, heroism, and the determination to survive and help others in the face of unimaginable danger. Through these accounts, we glimpse the true cost of war, not just in ships and planes destroyed, but in the lives forever changed. The fathers, sons, daughters, and friends whose bravery and resilience ensured that even in the darkest moments, hope and courage endured. While the attack on Pearl Harbor is widely remembered for its devastation and its pivotal role in bringing the United States into World War II, there are many lesser-known details that add depth and context to that fateful day. Distance and secrecy. The Japanese task force traveled over 3,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean, remaining undetected by American forces. They maintained strict radio silence, ensuring their approach remained a complete surprise. This extraordinary navigation feat demonstrated meticulous planning and discipline. Radar warnings ignored. Hours before the attack, operators at the Opana radar station detected a large formation of aircraft approaching Oahu. Unfortunately, the report was dismissed, as the planes were assumed to be friendly bombers arriving from the mainland. This small misjudgment contributed to the success of the Japanese surprise attack. Survivors of the USS Arizona. Of the 1,177 sailors who perished aboard the USS Arizona, some were trapped in compartments but managed to survive until rescue crews reached them. Today, the ship remains submerged, serving as a memorial to the men who gave their lives, with oil occasionally surfacing as a poignant reminder of the tragedy. The role of aircraft carriers. While battleships bore the brunt of the destruction, U.S. aircraft carriers were not in port during the attack. These carriers, Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga, would later play a decisive role in the Pacific theater, proving that the Japanese tactical success did not translate into long-term strategic victory. Dory Miller and the Navy Cross. The heroism of Navy cook Doris "Dory" Miller stands out as one of the most extraordinary personal accounts. His actions symbolized courage, breaking racial barriers in the U.S. Navy, and inspiring countless Americans during the war. Civilian casualties. Although the attack targeted military assets, 68 civilians also lost their lives. Many of these were residents near the harbor who had no connection to the ships or military, a sobering reminder of the widespread human cost of warfare. Admiral Yamamoto's warning. Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who orchestrated the attack, reportedly said afterward, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." This insight reflected the long-term consequences Japan could not foresee, despite their immediate tactical success. Cultural impact. Pearl Harbor reshaped American society. The attack fueled recruitment drives, accelerated war production, and united a nation previously divided over interventionism. It also left an enduring mark on popular culture, inspiring films, documentaries, books, and countless memorials that continue to educate and move generations. Surprising resilience. Despite the destruction, several ships were repaired and returned to service within months. The USS West Virginia and USS California, initially sunk or heavily damaged, were salvaged and contributed to later battles in the Pacific, symbolizing America's capacity to recover and fight back. The USS Arizona Memorial. Completed in 1962, the memorial spans the sunken battleship and serves as a place of reflection and remembrance. It allows visitors to connect directly with history, honoring the sacrifices of those who died in the attack. These facts reveal that Pearl Harbor was far more than a surprise military strike. It was a complex event shaped by strategy, chance, heroism, and unintended consequences. Understanding these details deepens our appreciation for the courage, resilience, and profound historical significance of that December morning.